Now, I often think I would have been a great weatherman because I'm wrong more than I'm right. And it looks like today they predicted a bright sunny day. I was looking forward to doing a lot of painting. And it looks like it's going to rain any minute. So I'm going to be very careful about how I sequence up this day. I don't want to be all set to paint and have it start raining, but it's really cloudy out there now. So I've got to resequence what I thought was going to happen. It was nice yesterday getting a nice ride, short ride. Even a short ride this time of year is always a surprise, but when they predict good weather and you don't get it, it's kind of disappointing. And it's disappointing no matter which pitcher is pitching that day in our pitching rotation. So we'll just reorient the day. That's funny, the fish made a special request. They say, hey, you feed the birds first, you don't feed us. So I may have to reorient my feeding schedule. Yeah, we always feed the eagles and the birds. Feed Grandpa Windy, feed Grammy. Wow. A lot of fun in the morning here. But this is the part we need before we can go down and get any serious work done. Then we have a serious day ahead of us. Looks like we'll be able to paint though. Okay, so now it's time to really get busy here. Plan up our stuff. It looks like, this is all dried up of course, it looks like the next step on this is to airbrush in some black. There's some black trim. And on this part, if we're happy with the yellow, I was hoping there would be some sun out. I could look at this out in the sun, but it looks pretty good, pretty close anyway. And you really never know, and here's a good example. If you can see it here, how the color changes when you put the clear on. So you really never really know. But so the thing to sequencing now is if I can get the black airbrushing on this, while that's drying, I can be putting the decals on this. And then I can maybe even get the yellow on this today if it sequences out the way I planned. But things really never, there's always a surprise here. And what we'll do if we get to a point where we're shooting clear and we have time while it's drying, I need to put some trim on this for Glenn. I need to fix the front part of the tank, but that's a very low priority thing right now. He's not riding that bike, of course. So, and we are riding this, so we're going to try to concentrate on getting this done. And one little side thing, while I made up my little list of things, and I'm going to go check off the list one by one, I decided I wanted to make up a fake little vent cover. That'll be fun to see if that looks good, and I'll explain that more. And I have all the little parts of the mirrors, which the vision of the view through the mirror was perfect, but I really don't like having that. I don't have a choice here. Now, this one of them is scuffed. It's the other one. The one that took a beating in the accident. So we'll sand these down, make them shiny black. When I plan out a day, usually it never goes as planned, but I always start off with what I think is a good plan. Now you might remember we had a bar as a spreader bar when we were working on a fairing. I'm going to put that back in because when I shoot the clear, there's no other way to hold the fairing, number one. And when you're doing the color, you can move it around and hold it and stuff. But once you have the clear on, I was holding it where the stripe was masked off. You can't really do that. So, and I'm going to have to be real careful about getting a really good steady place on that when I do the clear. But it's nice once we have the bar made, of course, we have it forever. Now on a complex paint job, there's always a general rule that I've used, even doing the airplanes and doing the motorcycles, is you always do the color that's the smallest first. In this case, the white. We painted everything white. Then you backmask out the smallest color. Follow through with this. Of course, once you're doing a repair, all bets are off. But I just wanted to mention this because it's good information. So now I want to expose only the black. I'm going to airbrush in this black. I want to only have the black exposed. So what I have to do is carefully look at how I have this done. And in fact, in this case, this will not be as difficult as I thought. I want to backmask off, since I already have this backmask, I'm really getting two for the price of one here. It's like going to ShopRite. But anyway, this edge here, if I lay this out, And this is why when I did this, I didn't want to compromise any of these paint lines. I knew that would be a problem. And going back, if you remember, I had to measure these and get them even and parallel and level, and holy mackerel, it was a lot of work. Well, now it's going to be, it's a lot of work replicating it, but still not out of our comfort zone here. I do want to make sure I get it exactly right on the money though. And one of the things that at least I have going in my favor now that I didn't have before, and to be very honest about this, I really loved riding this bike. It really, with that new front end, it really was even better than it was before, and it was pretty good before. It was a lot of fun. So now I'm saying I have to pay the price here. I really have to pay the price. But I know at the end of this, I'm really going to be happy. Now I know that's exactly where the black stripe was. I've already got this part already back masked off. Now I can just put a piece of tin foil down here, and I know I can airbrush in that stripe. Then I'll move on. Notice I always try to start with the simpler things and move on to the ones that require a lot more angles and edges and corners. So that stripe is ready. Now I also need to do pretty much a similar thing here. The objective now in this piece, since we have this back masked and this, is just to back mask whatever's white here, and that's going to be a little bit of a layout issue. And I made sure I sprayed enough white in here that I don't have a gray stripe anywhere. And then once that's done, we'll be ready to airbrush in all the black. And this looks like it's going to lay out relatively straightforward. I want to expose, just leave exposed anything that I want to be painted black. And I've got to go back and forth. I'm glad I have the other panel to look at, because I'm is that a 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch? There's a lot of different choices here. Okay, now I got to get the blue tape basically and lay out what's going to be all of the, let's see, the white is going to be here. I need to lay out the other side of the white stripe, lay out this, lay out this. Just takes a lot of time. Now when we first started this job, I wound up spending about $100 on all this tape. It has proven to be good to have tape inventory. Of course, the things that are obvious, like having enough touch-up paint, if you ever have these kind of a little damaged thing, or having extra tape. See, right now, if I had to run to Gavin's to buy a roll of this 3M blue tape, it would take up a chunk of the day that I don't want to give up. Now, Karen has a wonderful saying when we go shopping, and I agree with it 100%. She says, I like to have inventory. So a lot of times when we need one thing, she'll buy several, and then the next day we run out of Cheerios or we run out of gefilte fish or something, and all of a sudden I'm glad she had bought the extra pack, because I don't have to go to the store. Now we're quickly coming up on a time. This will be ready for some airbrushing very soon. But having the inventory, always a good thing. The last thing is just to tack rag this down, make sure all the corners are pressed down. Now the airbrush will give us a lot less of a paint edge. Take a little longer to paint, but right now it doesn't matter, of course. Of course, the only downside of doing an airbrush is constantly filling the airbrush, but small price to pay. Alright, that's going to have to dry before we even think about removing the tape. And boy, look at it stay. Looks like it's going to rain any minute, but it's hanging tough. The longer it stays, well, it's not raining, the better. Now, what I thought would be a good idea here is, that's the good one. The good one. No crash damage. I want to look at, there's two things I want to do with these mirrors. I want to sand them with 400, wet sand them. I want to get rid of all of the detail scratches that are on these. Then I want to prime them with sealer primer, hoping that we're not going to have one melt. But getting off this lettering, well, we're going to find out. I do not like flat black. That's, what can I tell you? That's from a life of working in a machine shop, I guess. I don't know. Anytime you have rough tooling marks or something that doesn't look good, you try to paint it flat black so nobody will notice. Well, I want people to notice the work I do. And for a good reason. But I don't want the cops to notice me. Hey, by the way, the other day, this is pretty funny. I'll share a little story. I've been riding with a Valentine radar detector, and of course, I always count at the end of the day, how many times did it save my bacon? And usually there's at least 2 or 3 times that I'll be tempted to say, well, here's a good spot I can, and then I hit beep, 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 beep. And yesterday there were about 3 that I said at the end of it, I said, I would have never seen that black unmarked car. And then as they go by, you see that like ghost decal police. So listen, you guys that are cops, look, just, you know, cool it. We're just having a little fun. Maybe we go 2 miles over the speed limit. Well, a little bit anyway. Anyway, I got to sand this, the whole part. Now, I know what somebody's thinking. Why don't you just paint right over the clear? It's already black. Well, maybe you could do that, but I'm prone to want to do things the old school way. I'll get this all sanded, get the clamp sanded. I have black in the airbrush already, so it's a win-win while the paint is drying. And that's what's always good about sequencing things up. If while you have paint in the gun, you can do. And by the way, here's a funny thing. I don't want to mention any names here because these things are made in China, but you touch this with sandpaper, and they must put the 1 molecule of paint on this. So you might think painting mirrors is a kind of a cut and dry thing, and we've painted a lot of them. Here's a couple of the do's and don'ts. First of all, we're going to try to sand that off. Of course, I've got to get this reasonably smooth, but what's going to happen, there's a couple of things happen with these. There's a vent hole. You don't want to clog that vent hole up. If there were a way, and I've tried, I've broken these, this is not really the kind of glass you think a mirror is made out of. It scratches very easily, so I'm real careful. And even as careful as I am, it's difficult because when you go to backmask this, you got to get your finger down in there or a blade or something. Very difficult to get in there and backmask it nice. This joint here, you can backmask with some 1/8" tape. Otherwise, you can't move the mirror, then the paint starts peeling up. All of this, as I've said before, this paint is 1 molecule thick. I'm sure they have that all figured out, right down to a, you know, a penny. But anyway, the whole point, because they sell this stuff so cheap, it's ridiculous, that I do want to get this as smooth as possible. If you use anything rougher than 400, what happens when you prime it, it's going to look like it has little hairs growing out of it. You sand it down, you put another coat of primer, or you can do, I've done it before, eliminate the primer, just paint it black over and over and over again until the hairs disappear. Because that gives you a good bond. But this is the kind of plastic I always talk about. When you're painting an old Honda 750, some of the side covers melt, some don't. It's a mystery meat. But just sanding this down, what I found works pretty good. If you can just smooth it out enough that those hairs come through. At 400, you'll still get a few hairs. But if you use like 220 or something on this, what happens? Oh, you need 4 coats of primer to get rid of it. And then the backmasking can be a real problem. It can be a real pain in the neck. But when you're all done, you've got something that I think is worth having. And you can look in a mirror and see what a handsome person you are. So this is one of the techniques I use. I don't really have fingernails like a you know, an office worker would, or a dentist or something. I take whatever little fingernail I have and I go down into the valley, try to get the tape to go as close to the edge as possible, Of course, sometime if you have decent fingernails, you can even cut it that way. But the idea is don't hold the blade this straight up and down. You've got to hold, as I say it, I'm trying to do this and be on camera at the same time. So if I lay the blade as close as I can this way, this is a good trick for doing it. And painting mirrors is really a pain. I painted a lot of mirrors, and one of the few jobs, it's like electricity, I don't look forward to. Now the edge is usually not that good, but you can get your fingernail down in there, make it a little bit nicer anyway. And once we get this masked, and I'll put some 1/8 inch blue tape here, this will be ready for some primer. So the idea of using sealer is to seal the plastic, and where we've done extensive sanding to get that lettering off, of course we want to get that off. The sealer, it stacks the deck in your favor, but it's no guarantee. I have painted things with sealer that the problem has still come back, but very rare. This is usually a good cure. Anyway, we're going to run outside, and it looks like it's warmed up to about 50 degrees. It was supposed to be such a nice day. I was anticipating doing a lot of painting today, but boy, not working out. The objective of this primer is to get the minimum coat on, that we get a full coverage. I'm not using it as a filler. If I was, after this coat I could put on some filler primer, but right now, light coats. Maybe 2 coats, maybe 3 coats, just enough light. Like to not get any runs if I could possibly help it, of course. But the thing is not to hold it and just get one of those thick, wet coats. Right now, don't need it. This is just acting as glue. And in the case of this, there's going to be no tape touching it or anything. I'll be able to get multiple coats of paint on without really any effort at all. It looks like it may get nicer. Boy, the weather is just so crazy. Okay, our parts are hanging up by the mirror. And the heat is still on in the house, of course. By the mirror, it's by the heating vent. I must need another cup of coffee. I always need a cup of coffee. All right, that'll dry for half hour, 45 minutes. Now here's what's good about a day like today. We have something drying, and we have something we can work on. And there are a couple little spots that are just not as level as I would like. I'm just going to dry sand these with some 400 and go out and airbrush on. I still have the airbrush filled with black. So give this a second coat, and it'll be just a little bit nicer. I don't want to start wet sanding anything. I don't want to get anything wet. But black, of course, shows every little defect, and really want this to be as good as possible. I want the whole thing to be as good as possible. And I'll try not to go through, but if I do, this is still going to get, in fact, I'll give everything a second coat of black, since that's going to be all we can do to this part today, is get the black on. Then this will have to sit overnight. Now you can see the high spots where the bodywork came through, a couple of high spots. That'll be one extra step. It adds a few minutes to the job, but I think that'll be a lot nicer. And since that black really pops when you put the final clear on it, well, the whole part pops, but I don't want to have even the little flaws in there. Now as I'm looking at the second coat of black, I think that was well worth putting that little extra effort in. Now, what happens is when you prime things and you sand the prime, that's usually if you try to skip that step, which is what I did, you can always make up for it just by putting on a coat of color, doing a light dry sanding like I did, and the result is pretty predictable. Anyway, that part's got to go to dry overnight now. Well, we have certainly beat the rain today. I want to see how this is drying up. Oh yeah, that's going to be fine. That's going to be fine. See, now I want that to dry overnight. I don't want that paint to be soft when I start pulling all the back mask, because the next part of this job is to pull all the back mask off and just expose the yellow. Then the yellow is going to get the decals. So again, this is the whole thing. I don't want to rush. What keeps me, look at all these shiny mirrors here. I love shiny mirrors. Look at them. They're all shiny, even the ones Chris gave me. What really happened on that first day of riding, when I had the little accident, what happened is I just, I don't know how to describe it. It's like I fell in love with the bike again. Just the same way when the first time I got this bike and had put it together, and Luciano helped me get it running and stop leaking gas and all the other things. It was in rough shape, but that really inspired me to really want to get this back together. And it'll be even better. It'll have the shiny mirrors, and I'm still thinking of that little, I'll show that little trick if it works out. I can't work on it today, or how I want to put one extra little piece in the fairing. Well, we're going to see how it works out. For right now, it's actually been a good painting day. I didn't think it was. And that's the whole thing with any paint. If you can get a good painting day, it just becomes so easy. Or, if God forbid, you should have a spray booth or a garage. Well, then it wouldn't be challenging. Now I even want to put a coat of paint on these. I'll scuff these up with some 400. Get a coat of shiny black on this. And even though these are all little minor details, but I'm always convinced that little details make all the difference in the world. Now what I'm going to do, just speaking of little details, before I put these on the motorcycle, in fact maybe I'll do it now, I'm going to scuff this up. Get the old paint off. Some of the paint, because I want to put sticky back sandpaper in here so that when these clamp together, they clamp onto pieces of sandpaper, and what that does, you don't have to over tighten the bolts then. These are delicate little bolts, and you know, most mirrors would have a bigger size bolt. Well, you know, they didn't engineer these the way I would engineer them. I'd put a bigger bolt anyway, and if you strip them, you can always rethread them. But I just think that's a great little tip. Once I get the paint on, I'll grind all that paint off and everything, because it'll get on there now anyway. And then I'll be all set. Getting these in shiny black, next step. Now the hardest thing on some of these little parts is finding some way to mount them on something so you can paint them. That's always a pain in the ass too. So I tried a couple different ways, and what I did, I put a loop of Gorilla Tape and just squashed it down. Now what that's going to allow me to do is get both sides of this, and actually I ought to tape off where the thread, doesn't even matter. Not enough paint's going to get in there, it's going to matter. I'm only going to put one coat of black and a couple of coats of clear, and that's it. Even small details like this, and I'm sure, absolutely sure, my paint is better quality paint than whatever they used in wherever these were made, in China or whatever. Who knows? Nobody knows. It's mystery meat. Now it's time for this to sand out. 400 sandpaper will probably be just fine. Once I get it sanded out, I'll decide if it needs a second coat of primer, or we could go right to black paint. Depending on how rough this is. Now you pick up a lot of little spots when you do this. I'll do one little spot just to show what I'm talking about. And since we put a lot of sanding into these, when you paint the primer on, it always looks like it's you know, like Beetlejuice, the hair's coming up and everything. But then when you do this sanding, and actually it's not a problem even if you put a second coat of primer on, because these are thin coats. I just want to show what's going to happen, if I can show this. Because a lot of people, I'm sure, the first time they paint something plastic and it looks ugly when you put the primer on, they get a little anxiety over it. Anyway, shouldn't have it. This is what it's going to look like when I'm done. It's going to show all the scratches. We'll get one more coat of primer on that, and that'll be ready for some black. And all these little steps, when you skip a step, yeah, you get done at 2 o'clock instead of 3 o'clock or whatever. But when you put the extra steps in, then you have that at the end of the job, when you have the bike for year after year after year, and you're looking at how nice everything looks, shiny, clean, easy to wipe the bugs off. You wonder why you don't do this in every part of your life. And then, so what's happened to me is, I realize I want to have these bikes the rest of my life, and I want them to be as nice as possible. I'm not looking to buy another bike. I want the ones I have to look as nice and clean and shiny and well maintained as possible. Okay, so we're ready for this, what I hope is going to be the last coat of primer. Get that primed and get it up under the heating vent. Believe me, the heat is still on. I'm amazed. The other day it was 70 degrees, not 70 degrees right now. So the second coat of primer, I just want to have a light coat of primer. I don't want to build this up any thicker than I have to. And if in doubt, it's always better to put 2 or 3 light coats on than one. The one thing never to do is just put it on. This will dry for about an hour, and then I'll put on some black and see how it looks. And if I have to, I can color sand the black. Now, this coat's looking pretty good. Not too bad. So far. Everything on these painting jobs is so far. Now, the second mirror doesn't have any crash damage, so this one was even easier to fix. But if you get it down like this and you put that last coat of primer, this should be ready then for some black. Without saying that you can do this as many times, you can sand it down, reprime it. If you live in a warm weather climate, the primer dries in a half an hour, not even. With the heating vent on, probably less than an hour and it's ready to sand. You'll always know if you're trying to rush too much, if the sandpaper clogs up with soft goop, looks like chewing gum, you probably should let the paint dry a little more. But I think once this dries, we're going to take a coffee break, and I got a couple little things to do for Karen. When I come back, we'll be ready to paint this black. I'm back from lunch and looking to see how these dried up. I got a feeling they're ready for the first coat of black. The first day in a long time, it's working to my favor that the heat is on. It's cooking that paint up pretty nice. It's almost like we live in Florida. The mirrors look like they're going to be fine. This is the crashed one, by the way. Okay, we're starting to fill up the laundromat, as you can imagine. Looking to see how our stuff's drying up here. Now, for such an unpredictable day, it looked like it might rain all day and it might be nice. Looks like we're going to get a lot done today. And this is perfect. This will be ready tomorrow for doing the yellow. That's amazing. These parts came out fine. Anyway, more to come. We got a little more time. I'm going to try to get some work done on the fairing, the front fairing. Now, one of the problems with a day like today is you never know how it's going to play out. It's always a surprise. I didn't think it was going to stay paintable all day. It looks like it still is. So what I have to do next on this is listen to that compressor. Oh my God, the world's loudest compressor. Even with a muffler, it's a loud compressor. What I got to do is start to peel this back. I want to use heat, of course. Now, the paint edge that's up here is going to be relatively thick, so anytime I'm peeling this up, I especially want to be careful, get some heat on it, because even though the heat's been on in the house, it's really not, this is not a summer day. Now, before I put the decals on here, this is a 2500 grit sandpaper, and I'm just dusting it. I want to get off the dust. I don't want to sand paint. I want to get the dust off. The reason is, once I put the decal on, if there's a little piece of dust under the decal, it leaves like a little bubble. In fact, I feel one right here. So just getting it smooth. I don't need to remove any paint. Just prep the surface up. That's ready to go. Now, it's because we've been experienced doing a lot of restorations. You don't think we thought we might crash, do you? But anyway, John always lays out extra decals, and I would suggest anybody does that. Of course, we don't need the Yamaha. Actually, the only one we need for this part of the project is the AMAR one, and I'm looking for the latest one here because we have several over there. Here it is. There it is. You never know how lucky you can be. John Pathia laid out the decals, printed the decals. All I did was spray the clear on top of them, and now we'll install them. Now, with any decals, it's always important to leave at least a 1/16 of an inch from where the ink ends. If you don't do that, you run the risk that the ink is going to bleed underneath, and that you'll, in essence, have a problem. And of course, I would always suggest a brand new razor and a cutting pad to get a nice, neat edge. Now on the bottom, that's about just roughly the right amount to have on there. So I made a basic layout with 1/8 inch tape, roughly where I want that to be. Of course, I'd like to get it reasonably symmetrical. Now, of course, because they are water slide decals, just 30 seconds in hot water, no more. As soon as I feel, see that starting to move? It's starting to move. Now I can lay it out. Get it roughly where I'd like it to be. I still would have a little bit of chance to move it around, but not infinitely. And I don't want to slide it around any more than I have to, because sometimes it removes some of the glue as I'm pulling this out. Very carefully, working from the center out with a Q-tip, a very clean Q-tip. Get as many of the air bubbles out as you can. Usually this goes pretty quick. And usually a half hour from now. Now if you see the ink bleeding out underneath it, you know you didn't leave enough of the clear material around the edge. That's your little tip off next time. And that's why whenever you make decals, the decal paper is relatively inexpensive, and most people can print it on their printer or have a friend with one of these printers like John has access to. And of course, John is the go-to guy for decals because he has done the research, the homework. He has done them for me for all of these restoration projects, and they've all been pretty good, to be honest. Now, in the case of this decal, this is one you're not going to find on eBay or something. If you want something similar to this, if you want it to say Luciano Felici, you gotta, or Glenn's got these on his, one of that green bike, the Ninja. You've got to do the layout on your computer, get the right computer paper, make plenty of decals and practice. That's the whole, just like going to track day. Just keep taking laps until you go fast. There's no secret. Want to be a good golfer? Play golf. Anyway, now the whole trick is to let this dry. Usually that's 10-15 minutes, sometime a half an hour. This looks like it went on just about as good as I could expect. But if it didn't, that's why we have extra decals. And that is the key to life here, is to know ahead of time that not every one of these will lay down. There'll be a little, I don't even know what to say, an air bubble or something in it, and then it makes you crazy. This one looks like, God forbid it was our lucky day. But now, to mention, this has been such an eclectic day. It looks like rain. It looks like, I wouldn't be surprised if it snowed. But it's still clear out there. I still can do some painting. It's incredible. It's an incredible day. Anyway, the most important thing is to get the edges to stick down, so that when you put the clear on, you can get that edge as flat as possible. And we're just going to babysit this. Now, they do make a product called Salvaset that's good for this. If you have edges curling up, it can help. Right now, it looks like this is going on without anything. That's going to have to dry, but while that's drying, and I don't know how much time we're going to have left here, I guess I could get some clear on the mirrors, and then tomorrow I could wet sand the mirrors while this is drying. See, I'm always trying to play leapfrog with these parts. And tomorrow that part should be ready for clear, hopefully. But anytime I can get ahead on even the mirrors, what it means is then those parts can be wet sanded tomorrow, where this part will have to dry. So I'll be, in essence, by playing a leapfrog, I'll be one day ahead. And let's face it, summer's here. See, I normally wouldn't be too concerned about leapfrog, but right now I'm leapfrogging into the summer here. And this is the combination that's worked well in my shop. 5172, the clear coat. 5186, the fast hardener. Those two have worked very, very well. And you're looking at between $90 and $100 a gallon, depending on where you buy it. And as I've tried to pass on information, you see I have a gun that has yellow paint, one has white paint, one has something else, one has black, red, green. I always have one that has nothing but clear in it. That's just a safety thing, that in the middle of spraying this yellow out doesn't come a glob of green or something. And it can happen and ruin your whole day. Now, I always like to, from time to time, see how things are drying up. We will get 2 or 3 coats of clear on that, about 20 minutes apart. Half an hour apart's even fine. It's still a little chilly outside. I like that a whole lot better than flat black. And all the bikes I've done it to, shiny mirrors, even the ones I've done for Luciano, I just think it looks just a little bit nicer. Well, with the spreader bar installed, it looks like maybe that'll hold it up, that I can get the clear on. I'd like to get 2 coats of clear, about 20 minutes apart if all goes well. Well, we really lucked out. You can't even imagine. The sun came out. Wow. And boy, did we take advantage of it today. This was absolutely a banner day. The decals look like they're laying down beautifully. The clear looks like it's laying down beautifully. I'm going to wait another half hour, put a couple more coats on the mirror, another coat on this, and I'm going to celebrate tonight. I'm hoping you can see the quality of that finish. That really played out nice. Boy. Now I know if you're not looking at this on a widescreen high-def TV, well, I'm not sure you can appreciate the quality. On a telephone, I don't know. Basically because I don't have a telephone, among other things. But anyway, I'm just doing a walk around, and this has been a day to remember. Now, it's not often I put in a 10-hour day. Today was worth every minute. I'm going to sleep like a baby tonight, knowing that fairing is That's about as good as it gets, considering it's been a repair of a repair of a repair. And once that's final finished, I also bought another thing. I bought all brand new screws for the windshield because I noticed they were only catching by 1 or 2 threads. I bought a bunch of screws a little bit longer. All details, I'm trying to take care of details, and by the end of the day when you can get off the spraying equipment, oh man, is that a relief. Now Karen and I have a saying for what a day like today is, and she invented the saying actually. She said it's good tired. She's tired, but it's good tired. Now it's going to be good sleep tonight. Boy, if you only knew. The decals look like they laid out, and they don't always lay out exactly the way I want. They did a great job. Oh boy. So among all the disappointments of the crash, at least there's some reward to having it back. And as I said before, I have fixed a lot of motorcycles. This one is going to be in my memory for a long time. Anyway, this all has to stay out here to dry tonight. Hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.